But first to the news out of the sector, and this month has seen 3 interesting surveys released in Australia. The first by Melbourne's Scanlon Foundation, mapping social cohesion. The report showed actually a big gap between the values of Labor and Greens supporters and Greens voters, and that got quite a lot of media attention. But Peter Shergold, this annual survey actually had some much broader findings and really told a bigger picture of Australia.
It's told a story since about 2007. They do about, I think, 2,000 respondents each year and ask about 81 questions, and they use that to measure the extent of social cohesion. Now, what's interesting, this year is about the same as last year, 2010, but significantly less social cohesion than back when the survey started in 2007.
How do you actually measure something like social cohesion?
So what they've done, they've got a series of questions that measure 5 variables. Sense of belonging, sense of worth, sense of equity, sense of participation and sense of acceptance. Every one of those indicators has gone down. Interestingly, the worst performer that has gone down significantly 2007 is people's sense of acceptance in Australia.
Opinion polls, of course, show one thing, and we're looking at those very closely at the moment, but this survey actually explores the levels of trust in the government, which is quite interesting.
Interesting and worrying, because, you know, when the survey started, about 50% of Australians said that they trusted government to do the right thing most of the time. This year is down at 30%, and what's interestingly, poorer Australians have significantly less trust. So only 18% of poor Australians trusted government to do the right thing most of the time. It also measures how much community participation there is. That's also worrying, because they looked at the level of volunteering. It was, I think, back at 38% in 2007. It's now gone down to 31%. So every indicator suggests that there are worrying trends going on in Australia.
You mentioned the poorer people with the lower levels of trust in the government. So we might focus on that, because there actually was another survey by the NAB and Good Shepherd Youth and Family Service looking at the financial challenges of those really struggling to make ends meet in Australia. What did that one show?
Well, it was interesting, because you remember earlier, just a couple of months ago, NAB and CSI did a report on financial exclusion. This is actually about the same sort of thing. It's looking at Australians who, fortnight in, fortnight out, depend on what are called payday lenders. This is informal people who lend money which you then repay when you get your fortnightly paycheck. Now, and the trouble is, you get caught in this rather vicious cycle of dependence. And the thing is, if you measure how much you're actually paying to borrow money for 7 days, 14 days, it's over 700% per annum. So you can see how poor people who don't have access to the normal banking system are really disadvantaged by depending on these informal payday lenders.
And get caught in that spiral.
And just get caught there, yep.
Another social impact survey, this was undertaken actually by CSI for the Australian Institute of Company Directors. This was the focus on boards of not-for-profits organisations.
Well, what it did, it looked at about 2,000 directors. About a third of them were directors on for-profit companies, about a third were directors on not-for-profit companies, and about a third, like myself, actually served on both. What it showed is that for those who serve on not-for-profit companies, about 80% do it for pro bono. They spend on average about 7 weeks a year, so that's, you know, more than half a day a week working on the not-for-profit organisation. And if you add that up, it's about $100 million a year of free time given by directors working on, you know, not-for-profit organisations and charities and so on.
And it's not easy for them. It's not any easier than actually operating other kind of even listed boards.
In fact, in many ways, it's riskier. I mean, one of the things that stood out to me is that about 1/5 of directors on not-for-profit organisations had to face up to the risk of insolvency. If you know, as a director, that's very worrying indeed. So no, being on a not-for-profit organisation may be very different, but it's not less complex than working for being a board director on a private company.
And all the same issues like the listed company space, mergers,
closures, the whole bit.
Very interesting. Also, this month, we've actually seen the launch of, I guess it's an attempt to improve business reporting on corporate corporate responsibility and corporate sustainability. There are existing indexes, though, so why have we looked at a new approach? What's missing in the existing approaches?
Essentially, there are too many bloody indexes. That's the truth. You remember, in this programme, we've reported on lots of them. We talk about companies that gets awards. I think we've mentioned the the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the FTSE for Good Index, Global Reporting Initiative, the London Benchmarking. There are literally over 100 different indexes now to report on corporate social responsibility or to report on sustainability. The difficulty is many of those reports focus much more on compliance than measuring performance. And many people are thinking actually what you're starting to measure is how good a company is at reporting rather than the quality of the measures on which they're reporting. And of course what happens, companies put out their normal financial report for the AGM, then they often issue a sustainability report or a citizenship report or a CSR report or a foundation report, and people say, hang on, we've just got too much reporting. Can't we integrate all this, the economic and the social and the environmental, in a single report? So as a big group of international businessmen got together trying to work on integrated reporting, and essentially they're looking for submissions to them on a draft they've prepared by December. The hope is, of course, you get a single measure of reporting and not yet another measure of reporting.
And I understand actually that integrated reporting is something that the potential future Prime Minister, or certainly a past Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, actually spoke about recently at a lecture.
This is the past and potential future Prime Minister.
Yes.
Well, look, it was very good because the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Kevin Rudd, did give the annual Qantas CSI Social Impact lecture last week. I thought it was a really important speech because it is unusual to have an Australian politician speaking out so clearly on the importance of corporate social responsibilities. And you're right, one of the things he was saying is if we're serious about this, then companies have got to start to measure and demonstrate the impact of what they're doing. They do have to report in transparent ways.
This is as you were talking about the Jobs Forum last week as well. That was kind of on the agenda.
No, it was. Actually, I was facilitating the Jobs Forum on the same day
I was watching you live on Skype.
Yeah. A very good programme. But on the same day as the Qantas Social Impact Lecture. And of course that was interesting because it was very much focused on, if you like, the economics of job creation, how you can balance supply and demand. But it was interesting that at one of the panel discussions, there started to be a discussion about access to employment, access to jobs, and particularly the issue with Indigenous people, not getting access, and the way that contributes to the level of comparative disadvantage that